What inspired me to make this series of videos, to which this one is the introduction, is this video by Red Bart about localization and translation. Link is in the description. I won't say she's wrong on purpose, but she is biased in the sense that she has a clear position that localization and dubbing is a good thing. Her arguments are sometimes based on some misguided definitions of what localization is, and it would be kinda hard to have a dialogue using those definitions. She talked to some localizers in her video, so as someone who has done both translation and localization, I can't help but think that her video does a huge disservice to the discussion. You can watch her 30-minute video and then come back here to understand how and why I think she's kinda wrong. Full disclaimer, I am what you could call an anti-localization activist or anti-localization nerd. My point of view is that art should never be localized, but I will try to provide a neutral framework. So if you disagree with my moral position, you can express that in a way that makes sense. In this introduction, I will especially try to not take any sides. Localization is sometimes used interchangeably with translation. In Red Bart's video, she conflates the terms, basically saying that localization is part of the translation process, but those are very distinct words with very distinct meanings. And while translation can be part of the localization process, the goals and results of translation and localization are very different. And you can have one without the other, as I'm going to illustrate ahead. Translation is the process of expressing meaning from one language to the other. It is most likely as old as language itself. The goal of true translation is to use one language to represent as faithfully as possible the meaning of something from a different language. I'm using the term true translation to exclude more broad meanings that take things like transcreation and imitation as valid. Language is a highly cultural and for the most part organic. They evolve by being spoken by different people in different places and in different contexts, so naturally they evolve features, nouns, and verbs that are not present in other languages. Because of this, making indirect equivalencies is an integral part of translation. Let's translate a sentence from Japanese to English. The best translation for 昨日お好み焼き食べた is I ate okonomiyaki yesterday. If you change okonomiyaki to anything else, like pancake for example, it is a worse translation. It was not pancakes that were eaten. Meaning was lost in translation. Changing okonomiyaki to pancakes is as bad as changing ate to snorted, as far as technical accuracy is concerned. Language does not exist in a vacuum. Language is intrinsically linked to culture and context. Again, the goal of translation is to use one language to represent as faithfully as possible the meaning of something from a different language. Therefore, the more you can preserve the original culture and context, the better your translation is. In her video, Red Bart argues that some people are asking for a literal translation of anime. Note that there is no such a thing as a literal translation of a work. Literal translation is a device that can be used to give your audience context. For example, when talking about Aomori, you can let your audience know that Aomori literally means blue forest, or that Megiddo literally translates as wrath of God, or that Schadenfreude means harm joy. But that's it. A literal translation is sort of a misnomer actually, since the point of it is not to convey the meaning of the whole, but to present context by ignoring the meaning of the whole in order to present the meaning of the parts. This asking for a literal translation thing is deeper than this and will be dealt in a future video. Localization, on the other hand, is to make something local. What that means is, to localize an item is to change it to look like it's local, and to be palatable to the locals. While a perfect translation means the input and output are as close as possible in meaning, a perfect localization feels like it was made in your locality. If you ever used an app, website, or any product without knowing it was foreign, if you ever saw a TV show or played a video game without knowing it was not from your country, then that means it was perfectly localized. Unlike translation, localization is much broader than language alone. Icons, images, colors, sound effects, ingredients, almost anything is in its scope. The goal is not to preserve context or culture or even meaning, but to adapt. As mentioned before, Redbard appears to think that slight grammatical or textual changes in text are localizations, which is entirely wrong. Improving comprehension or using correct grammar and word order is not localization, but an integral part of translation. I mentioned ingredients before. The reason is you can even localize food. A myriad of industrialized foods are localized in order to be marketable. That includes changing names and sometimes ingredients, either to conform to local regulations or to adhere better to local taste. You can localize apps, websites, movies, TV shows, video games, food, articles of clothing, pretty much anything can be localized. As you can see, there can be localizations even when language is not relevant at all. Or, and this is super cool, even when both target and origin speak the same language. The UK and USA speak the same language, but companies still need to localize their products and material between the two in order to succeed most of the time. Which brings me to my next point. Localization is a commercial process. As I said before, the goal of localization is to make something easily digestible for the local population. The goal is to reach more people, to thrive commercially. Localization is a product of globalization, so as a formal, widespread phenomenon, it's very new. In conclusion, translation and localization are distinct processes with different results. One is not better than the other in a vacuum, but each has a specific goal in mind. There are a lot of aspects that I did not talk about on purpose in this video, like the bringing the material to the audience versus bringing the audience to the material debate, imitation, transcreation, indirect translation, accessibility, technical writing, localization sickness, or any other localization or translation issues for that matter. This is an introductory video, so I can use the words localization and translation freely in the next episodes. So expect me to talk about those things in the future. Thank you for watching. See you next time.